A black boy was selling flowers in the rain, determined to save his family when the businessman rolled down his car window and heard the reason. Tears fell. He couldn't believe what that boy had been through. The rain fell steady and cold, soaking the streets of Westbridge. Josiah stood at the corner of Baker Avenue, his feet planted in a puddle, his shoes long since drenched. He clutched the flowers tightly to his chest, keeping them as dry as he could, his hands trembling from the cold. His sweater had frayed sleeves, and his jeans were too short for his growing legs. He shifted uncomfortably as water pooled around his ankles, but his eyes stayed locked on the passing people. Umbrellas shielded them from the downpour, their faces hidden, their gazes fixed ahead. Nobody stopped, nobody even noticed him. Josiah took a deep breath and adjusted the flowers in his hands. Today had to be different. Rent was due in 3 days, and Mr. Galvin, their landlord, had already made it clear: no payment, no place to stay. The weight of that warning pressed on his chest. The scent of rain mixed with car exhaust filled the air as Josiah tried to ignore the cold creeping into his bones. A couple passed by under a large black umbrella. Josiah stepped toward them, his voice cracking slightly as he called out, "Flowers, sir? Ma'am? Only a few left, please. They're fresh." The man barely glanced at him, shaking his head. The woman didn't even turn. Josiah took a step back, biting the inside of his cheek to stop the frustration from showing on his face. He was used to this, used to people brushing him aside like he didn't exist. He returned to his spot by the corner and tried to gather his thoughts. A family walked by, a mother holding her son's hand tightly as they hurried past the puddles. The boy looked at Josiah for a brief moment, curiosity flickering in his eyes before he was pulled along. Josiah's chest tightened. For a fleeting second, he thought of his little sister, Mila. She used to laugh like that boy, her smile wide and bright, but lately, she'd grown quieter. The stress at home had taken its toll. The memory of Mr. Galvin's stern voice played in Josiah's head again. One more missed payment, and you're all out. No exceptions. He tightened his grip on the flowers. There wasn't any time to think about what might happen if they couldn't pay. The rain wasn't letting up, and neither could he. From the corner of his eye, Josiah saw a sleek black car pull up to the intersection. The sedan was polished to perfection, its windows slightly tinted, expensive. He usually didn't bother with cars, but something about this one made him take a chance. He stepped off the curb, crossing the street quickly before the light changed. The rain hit his face in cold, sharp drops as he reached the driver's side and tapped gently on the window. The man inside turned to look at him. His grey hair was neatly combed, and his suit looked like it cost more than Josiah's family's entire rent. The man's expression was neutral as he studied Josiah, his gaze lingering on the flowers. Slowly, he rolled the window down. Josiah forced a smile, holding up the bouquet. "Flowers, mister? Just a few left. Please, I'm trying to sell them." The man didn't say anything at first. His tired eyes seemed to search Josiah's face, and for a moment, the rain and the city noise faded into the background. The light turned green, and the cars behind the sedan honked impatiently, but the man didn't move. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and rough. "What are you doing out here in this weather?" Josiah hesitated. Most people didn't ask questions. They either bought the flowers or walked away. "I need to help my mom, sir," he said finally. "We're behind on rent, and it's just me, my mom, and my sister. Please." The man's face softened, and he looked away for a moment, his hand resting on the steering wheel. When he looked back at Josiah, there were tears in his eyes. "How old are you?" he asked. 14, sir." The man exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the wheel. "I lost my son a few months ago," he said quietly. "He would have been about your age." Josiah swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. The man's pain was clear in his voice, and it made Josiah's own struggles feel small by comparison. "I'm sorry, mister," he said softly. The man nodded, wiping his eyes quickly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bill, handing it to Josiah. "Here, take this." Josiah looked at the money. It was more than enough to cover the flowers he was holding. He shook his head firmly. "I don't want charity, sir. Please, just buy the flowers." The man stared at him, a small, sad smile forming on his lips. "You're a good kid," he said. He reached out, taking the bouquet from Josiah's trembling hands. "I'll buy them then." Josiah nodded, the tension in his chest easing slightly as he accepted the money. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "No," the man said as he rolled up the window. "Thank you." The sedan moved forward as the light turned green, disappearing into the grey haze of the rain. Josiah stood there for a moment, staring after it, before heading back to his corner. He tucked the money into his pocket, his fingers shaking. It wasn't enough to cover the rent, but it was something. The rain didn't let up, and neither did Josiah. He continued calling out to passers-by, his voice growing hoarse as the hours dragged on. His hands were numb, and the flowers were starting to wilt, but he couldn't stop. Not yet. As the sky darkened, Josiah heard the sound of a car slowing to a stop nearby. He turned and was surprised to see the same black sedan. The man stepped out this time, the rain drenching his suit almost instantly. "You're still here?" the man asked, his voice carrying over the sound of the storm. "Yes, sir," Josiah said. "I still have some flowers left." The man shook his head, his expression unreadable. "Come on, kid, let's get you out of this rain." Josiah hesitated, unsure of what to say. "I can't, mister. I need to sell these." The man sighed, running a hand through his soaked hair. "I want to help you," he said. "Not just by buying flowers. I can't explain it, but I feel like I need to do something for you and your family." Josiah's pride flared up and he shook his head. "No charity," he said firmly. "I'm not a beggar. I just need people to buy these flowers." The man smiled faintly. "I respect that," he said. "But what if I offered your mom a job? Would that be okay?" Josiah blinked, caught off guard. "A job? For my mom?" The man nodded. "I own a business. I could use someone like her. Tell her to meet me tomorrow, here on this corner." Josiah hesitated, the weight of the offer settling over him. It felt too good to be true, but something in the man's eyes told him he was sincere. Finally, Josiah nodded. "Okay, sir, I'll tell her." The man reached out, shaking Josiah's hand firmly. "Good, my name's Mr. Bennett. And don't worry, I'll be here." Josiah watched as the man climbed back into his car and drove away. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope warmed his chest. He gathered the rest of his flowers and headed home, the rain still falling around him. The streets of Westbridge felt a little less heavy as he walked. That night, Josiah told his mom about the stranger and his offer. She looked at him, her tired eyes filling with cautious hope. "We'll see," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But thank you, Josiah, for everything." Josiah nodded and went to bed, the sound of rain tapping against the window. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that things might just get better. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another tale of resilience, hope, and humanity. Your support means everything.